It is 12 minutes after 7 o'clock now. This is On the Island. Fires are still burning in Los Angeles, and they've forced 100,000 people to evacuate. Officials say 12,000 structures have been damaged or destroyed so far. The crisis part of the situation is still far from over, but when Los Angeles starts to rebuild, what could it mean for BC's forestry sector? I'm joined now by Keta Cosman, who is the publisher of forestry trade publication Madison's Lumber Reporter. Keta, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
What have previous disasters in the U.S. meant for the demand for BC lumber?
Well, the example that I look to is Hurricane Katrina, and that was at the early days of FEMA, the emergency response organization in the U.S., and it's a little bit of a different situation because, water is flooding is different from fire, but in general, what happened with the lumber industry was they bought all of the wood that they were expecting to need for the rebuilding with no concern of where to store the volume or cost. They just straight ahead pre-bought over 6 months. It was the first time anything like that ever happened. And there's a couple of things because normally that's not really possible because lumber needs to store. It does have a lifespan, and it has to be undercover inside, for if it's going to be more than a year.
Right.
For what we're seeing right now, I'm not so sure because there's been some changes administratively with how FEMA operates, and the early word, which might not be accurate, is that LA is considering when they do rebuild, it will be a different kind of building structure. But regardless of which type of building they do, they need wood in some way, at least a little bit.
Well, that's interesting, though. But so if I hear you correctly, California could choose between different building materials, and one or the other could mean a lot less or a lot more demand for BC lumber. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they have to use like wood frame because of the earthquake. Like they're in a little bit of a situation there. They can't build out of brick or concrete. So the type of wood is kind of what I'm saying. It might not necessarily be the standard 2x4 stick frame construction that it was before and that we see in usual houses. For example, they could go into the engineered wood, the new higher value remanufactured wood products like cross-laminated or veneers, LVL or LSL or glulam. These are quite fire resistant, and they're not made by like a regular sawmill that we're used to seeing all across North America. It's made in a specialized facility.
I see what you mean, though. But so one way or the other, there's going to be a significant uptick in demand for BC lumber products.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at the big picture, there's going to be an increase in demand anyway. There's a need for housing construction across the continent. It's been quite muted now for about 2.5 years. And we know what the demographics are. We know what the age of people who are coming into home buyer or moving out of the house, and it's been underbuilt, both in the U.S. and Canada. So regardless of, we actually thought that there was going to be an increase in housing last year. So regardless of emergency, there will be an increase in construction, and definitely Canadian BC wood is a big part of that.
Meanwhile, we've got Donald Trump coming into the White House, coming back in less than a week, threatening tariffs on Canadian goods. I wonder how the lumber industry in BC is preparing for potential tariffs, more tariffs to be added very soon.
Yeah, that would be quite something because there's already pretty steep tariff. And the thing for people to understand is that in North America, Canada or U.S., wood is sold in U.S. dollars. So whether you're in Canada or in the U.S., if you're a builder and you're buying wood from the producer, it's the charge is in U.S. and Canadian companies or offshore does not pay that duty that goes when the wood is going into the U.S. So, to my mind, while this may be a negotiating tactic, and that's not, Trump is not really expecting to put on this duty. There's something else that he wants. That's why he's saying this. If it was for lumber, because there's already a trade barrier, what would most likely happen is the Canadian companies would continue further to look for other markets rather than having to deal with this extra constraint that their customers would have to pay.
What about costs here then for consumers, for construction companies, and so on? I mean, if demand goes up as it looks likely to, what do you think it will mean for British Columbians and what we pay, Keta?
Well, now that's an excellent question because we just now we're in a new year, and I'm able to look back over the price trend, especially last year, and we've achieved a good stability. The base price for lumber is higher than prior to all the disruptions of COVID and the atmospheric river and changes to society. The base price is now higher because the costs are higher, but we don't have those spikes that we saw a few years ago. And the price trend line for our benchmark, the Western spruce that comes out of the Pacific Northwest, is very even for 2024 compared to 2023. And so what we have, when you look at that balance, is a lot of the mills have been slower. There's been a lot of curtailments, I'm sure you've heard. So first, what would happen is manufacturing volumes would increase. And then once that production volume reaches the maximum or sort of like the top level, what the mill wants, after that, the prices would start going up. The mills would rather sell a higher volume at a good price than have, some ridiculous spike that we had before, but not sell very much wood.
Meanwhile, in all of this, we have environmental groups talking about the need to have better protections for some BC forests, especially old growth forests. I wonder how much pressure there's going to be on the BC government, Keta, with environmental groups reminding them of past commitments on old growth, but also facing increased demand, higher costs for consumers, and so on. What kind of pressure is this going to put on the provincial government?
Well, this is the coast we're talking about now. It's a specialty product, and it's the cedar and the Douglas fir, and the coast is already managed. There, when people talk about old growth, there is 103 individual designations of what is old growth. So when they say old growth, what do they mean? Okay, and there is harvesting in some of these areas that have been highlighted or that are popular, but largely on the coast, we're even in tertiary stands now. We've been for quite a while harvesting secondary stands. It's a regenerative product. It's a regenerative commodity, and the coast timber is a different thing. That people don't generally build homes out of cedar and Douglas fir. Douglas fir is used by architects, but in general, it's the SPF. It's the interior.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
You don't find Douglas fir wall studs anymore. I take your point.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. It's all. It's the appearance, right? Or outdoor, and it fetches a lot. It's very expensive to buy. The interior, apart from environmental groups or whatever, there is an issue with the supply of the timber, as we know, because we had the pine beetle and then we had the fires. And the reason this was such a problem was the fires and the beetle attacked where the mills were. I mean, there's lots of timber across the province, but it's either park or it's not accessible. There's not a road. There's going to be a change. So when I talk about these advanced building materials and the engineered wood, they use a different kind of timber. They use a peeler log. Lumber and logs have grades. So the number 2 saw log is used to make the 2 and better lumber that is used in construction. And that's what is being reduced in supply. But the peeler log is plentiful, and it just needs to be adopted more into more building projects. Both
Microsoft and Google
announced at the end of last year that their next complex is going to be made out of cross-laminated. It's going to be made out of mass timber. So, and that's what I was saying, is the more fire-resistant building wood that could be used also in LA.
Well, Keta, we're out of time. I wish we had more time, but thanks for joining us. It's good to have you with us this morning.
Sure thing, anytime.
Keta Cosman is publisher of Madison's Lumber Reporter, a Vancouver-based industry publication.
Request a sample now. Don't miss out on this vital and timely information. Your colleagues and competitors are already subscribing. Below in the caption is a link to request a sample, and you can see the full list of the 500 individual softwood lumber and panel commodity prices that we track every week and what is the current price. And we will also send you the commentary explaining why those prices have changed. If you want more, you can subscribe and have access to a login to the dashboard and see this data for yourself every week.